and welcome everyone who has joined us here today. On behalf of the National Catholic Educational Association, thank you for joining us for this professional development opportunity. I am Christy Blewett, NCEA's facilitator for today's webinar, From Inclusion to Belonging, Lessons Learned on a Continuing 25-Year Journey. Just while everyone is logging in, we have a few housekeeping notes. Today's session is being recorded for archival purposes. If you have questions during the presentation, please use the Q&A window where all questions will be monitored, and we will do our best to answer them throughout and definitely at the end. At the conclusion of today's session, a link to the online survey will be shared in the Q&A box with instructions on how to receive a certificate of completion for this webinar. Today's webinar will be presented by co-hosts Dr. Joseph Vorbach and Mrs. Diane Elliott. Dr. Vorbach has served as the Superintendent of Schools for the Diocese of Arlington in Virginia since 2019, working on behalf of Bishop Burbidge to support principals and pastors in the 44 diocesan schools and 6 independent Catholic schools where 18,000 students are enrolled. Here, he has also served as head of school and principal at his alma mater, Bishop O'Connell High School. Dr. Vorbach is a retired Coast Guard commander, taught international relations and national security courses for the Humanities Department of the Coast Guard Academy, and served as Department of Homeland Security Chair at the National Defense University at Fort McNair in Washington, D.C. Dr. Vorbach has earned a Master's of Arts in Education, a Bachelor of Science in Government, a Master of Arts in Law and Diplomacy, and a PhD in International Relations. Mrs. Diane Elliott serves as the Assistant Superintendent for Student Services and Federal Programs for the Diocese of Arlington in Virginia. She joined the Office of Catholic Schools in 2001 as the Special Services Coordinator, where she supported school personnel on the inclusion of students with disabilities. Previously, Diane worked as a special education teacher in West Virginia, Maryland, and Virginia. She was the first transition coordinator for Spotsylvania County Schools, assisting students with their transition to the workforce or higher education, then became the special education coordinator serving students with learning and intellectual disabilities. NCEA is excited and grateful to have you both with us today. We'll begin in a prayer. So Dr. Vorbach, Mrs. Elliott, thank you for being here with us today. The floor is yours, or should I say the screen is yours.
Thank you, Christy.
Thanks, everyone. It's good to be with you.
All right. Joe, if you could advance the slide.
Yes, I can. Although I am, there we go. Thank you.
So we want to begin today in prayer, and I do want to give credit to Dr. Christy Bonfiglio of the PI program at the University of Notre Dame for this prayer. I love to use it with all of my professional developments. It's telling me to start my video. Okay. So let us place ourselves in the Lord's presence and begin in the name of the Father, and of the Son, and of the Holy Spirit. Amen. Father of all that is good and holy, we ask that you bless us with your infinite love and mercy as we work with all students made in your image, students who read with grace and those who need grace to read, those who lift others up and those who need to be lifted up, students who embrace learning and those who need to be embraced to learn, students who make us smile and those who need to smile. Grant us the knowledge, patience, and compassion to serve all students in our care, for they have your gifts to celebrate. We ask this in the name of your Son, Jesus Christ. Amen. In the name of the Father, and of the Son, and of the Holy Spirit. Amen. All right. Well, the first thing we'd like to do is have you introduce yourself. And we're going to do that in the Q&A because the chat has been disabled. Is that right, Christy?
That is correct.
Okay. So In the Q&A, we'd like you to tell us who you are, what school and diocese you're from, and your role, whether you're a teacher, an administrator, a counselor. And then we're real curious to see where you are in terms of inclusion of students with intellectual disabilities, whether you do not enroll them, you're considering enrolling those students, or you already do it. So just a 1, 2, or 3. I'm seeing some 2s. I'm seeing dioceses all over the place.
Yeah, there's a lot of folks checking in from different places around the country. That's great.
Cleveland, Marymount, it's right up the road from us. Wilmington, Delaware. Green Bay, Wisconsin.
And Loyola Marymount out in California. Honolulu.
Okay, and we have a mixture of folks who do not enroll students, those who are considering it, and we have a few who are already enrolling students with intellectual disabilities. So that's great. We are thrilled to have you all with us today.
And hello, Sister Carl Ann. All right, great.
All right, next slide is our objectives for today. So this is not a how-to. It's really more of a what has happened in the Diocese of Arlington over the last 25 years. But I'm about to take you back 49 years. And kind of our lessons learned, where we are today, and how we plan to move forward. And also to let you know that we would like to be a resource for all of you.
Just as we surveyed you about, where you currently are, we're obviously at some point along a journey as well that continues to evolve. We have a strategic plan in the diocese that we'll talk more about later that is an indicator of that, because it highlights goals that we have that have yet to be achieved. We have grander aspirations, greater hopes for what we might be able to do here. And so, as Diane said, this is an unveiling, if you will, of what our journey has looked like. It may be that it affirms you in different ways about things that are happening in your diocese. And we would definitely want to conclude in a way that speaks to the spirit of being helpful to you and also continued sharing among all of us. So thank you.
All right, well, we thought we would start with our definition of inclusion. So this is what we're looking at in the Diocese of Arlington. And when we say inclusion, we're talking inclusion of students with disabilities in general here. We always try to use the terminology inclusion of students with disabilities because we have had some pushback from all of the cultural, societal issues that are going on. And so we've had some people say inclusion, well, who are you including? So we try to be real cognizant of saying inclusion of students with disabilities. But we are an environment where each student is accepted, and we try to challenge and celebrate their gifts. Our educators are working collaboratively with our special educators in order to make sure that we are modifying the curriculum as needed for students with intellectual disabilities, but yet keeping our expectations high so that they're able to move forward and eventually become contributing members of society as they move into the adult world.
Diane,
one thing, go ahead.
Maybe this is a good spot for you to say a little bit more on that point about the process by which students, I'm thinking specifically of our high schools where students are enrolled, and what you know about that process of interface between the, say, for example, the director of the program, the parents and the student, and that process of making sure those goals are set and that there's a clear understanding of the effort of the desired outcomes that we're trying to achieve, not only in terms of having that student have that inclusion experience, but to successfully achieve some of those goals that are set.
So some of what we do with the high schoolers is to make sure that we are preparing them for adult life. So you're looking at some of the transition aspects of helping the parents understand that they really do need to be linked to some of the community service agencies, and that we need to take into account what the student is interested in. Do they want to go to college? Do they want to learn more about the world of work? And if it is work, where are their vocational interests? Are they interested in working with animals or cars or working with children? So there's a lot there that our high school programs are working toward, and giving our high school students the opportunity to experience some of those things, because while we may think we want to do something, we don't really know until we start trying it and see either I really like this, or what was I thinking? This is not up my alley.
Right. Thanks. You ready? Next slide.
Yep.
Okay.
So we started 25 years ago enrolling students with intellectual disabilities at Paul VI High School. We started with 6 students, and this is a picture from the 23-24 school year, where they now enroll 16 to 18 students. So what we want you to understand is we start small. This high school says they will not go any higher than 16 to 18 students with intellectual disabilities. We want to try to mirror the percentage of students with intellectual disabilities within our schools as we see it within the general population. So we try to keep our numbers at that level.
It's worth pointing out here that this photo is taken in front of the new St. Paul VI Catholic High School out in Loudoun County when the school began, and it was in its original location in Fairfax City. That's where they were when they started this program. And when we talk a little bit later about Porto Charities and how they become a great partner for us, it started in Fairfax, and this is the group of students out there with their teachers in the beautiful new campus in Loudoun County, Virginia.
So we wanted to share with you our timeline. And as I said, I'm going to take you back 49 years, because in the Diocese of Arlington, we started looking at providing services to students with learning disabilities back in 1975. Mrs. Ellen Coakley, who's pictured here, was a parent who had an interest in making sure that individuals with learning disabilities could get a Catholic education. And back in 1975, that's when Public Law 94-142 was signed into law. So it was not very common back then that a parent would be free to say, Diane has a learning disability, she's going to need something different. Because what happened back then, typically if a parent made a statement like that, they were told, oh, you're going to have to go to public school. That's not what Mrs. Coakley wanted. And so starting way back in 49 years ago, our diocese had parents pushing us all along. And Mrs. Coakley started what was termed Seton Centers, where a school the parents at that school would contract with this organization, and Mrs. Coakley would send a teacher to that school in order to provide services for the students with learning disabilities. From there, we had to start gaining the trust of parents in order to tell us that their child had been diagnosed with a disability. In 1998, St. Paul VI High School started what we termed the options program. So those were the first 6 students who had intellectual disabilities. And that was started because, again, there were parents who said, we want our children to have a Catholic education. These children all had intellectual disabilities. They talked to the principal at that high school. They talked to the then superintendent, and they got permission to go out to the state of Washington to Eastside Catholic High School, where there was already a program. So we weren't even the first to do this. We were modeling off of the other high school. In 2001, the principal said to our superintendent at the time, we have all these students with disabilities. We need somebody to help us coordinate what we're doing. And so the position of special services coordinator was created. And I was fortunate enough to be hired for that position. So I've been with the Diocese of Arlington for 23 years now. And I was able to work with all of our schools and start to put some procedures in place on how we were going to accommodate students and what kind of paperwork were we going to have in our files or ask parents to provide us with. From that program at Paul VI High School, our other principals and pastors then started to say, well, we're going to do something similar. So St. Mark Parish opened a school in 2004. They opened with the idea that they would have an evangelist program. So they changed the name a little bit, but that they would enroll students with intellectual disabilities. Now that school decided, because they were just opening their school, that they would fill grades K-8 first, and then they would start enrolling students. So there was a little delay between opening the school and enrolling the students with intellectual disabilities. St. John Paul the Great High School was opened in 2008. When that school was built, it was built with the idea of we were going to have an options program there. And so from day one, there were students enrolled at John Paul the Great High School with options. We have a couple other elementary schools then that came on board, Holy Spirit School, and then Bishop O'Connell High School, where at the time, Dr. Vorbach was the principal. And we've had others, and you'll notice they all kind of change the name a little bit because they're trying to, well, some of our schools don't want a program name, and I'll talk about that in a little bit. But Joe, did you want to talk at all about when Bishop O'Connell started the expanded services program?
Sure, thank you. And I'll try to come at it from 2 angles. The first connection I would like to make is between the Seton centers. O'Connell was one of the schools where there was a Seton Center. And by the time I started working there in 2008, the Seton Center had evolved and it had a sponsor, kind of a naming sponsor where it had been named after a beloved teacher who was known for his support of students who learned differently. And so it had become the Muller Center. And the Muller Center was a part of the school's offering to allow to provide greater support, so it was easier to welcome students with some identified learning disabilities that previously the school probably would have not been as open to. And as a new principal, I was learning a lot, both about the history, but also about those processes that are sort of critical, obviously, at the admissions time frame, when the admissions office is working with the family, understanding what the student's needs are, and trying to be in the position of being able to say yes to as many folks who are seeking Catholic education for their children. And I will say that Bishop O'Connell at that time, and I think still to this day actually, had extra tuition costs for students who were going to be in the Muller Center. That's significant because fast forward to 2015, I wanted to share about how O'Connell leadership got to the point of being ready to proceed with the expanded services program. Specifically, I was the head of school. I had been the principal. I'd become the head of school, and I had a new principal who I had hired, and he had prior experience both being a teacher at Paul VI High School and then later being an administrator, the dean of academics at St. John Paul the Great from the time it opened until 2013. So he was there for 5 years. And so he had been part of working in the options program, having familiarity with the options program at Paul VI. And then he had this experience with opening a brand new Catholic high school with an options program at John Paul the Great. So he was a great help, not only to me, but to the whole school community in helping us get to that decision point. Specifically, I recall this gentleman, Carl Patton, my colleague, he, for my benefit, principally, I think at the time, tapped into those networks. He reached out to families, teachers, students, former peer mentors, and we had several different listening sessions at Bishop O'Connell to hear about a variety of things to consider in order to make sure that we would do this right when we finally decided to do it. And I think back on that. So I guess what's the message is to tap into those existing networks, whoever's already doing things, encourage interdiocesan sharing and professional development in those areas, reach out beyond your diocese to hear more from experts. And we continue to do that, and leverage those opportunities. But ultimately, it was in the spring of 2015 that we felt we were just about there. The problem was we were already past the point at which the board had approved the budget, and we really didn't have money in the budget, earmarked anyway, for the hiring of at least one person who was going to help us run that program. And we also needed to talk to the faculty ultimately. They knew we were exploring the possibility. And so I recall the last faculty meeting before all the teachers left, and we were as honest as we could be. We said, we think we're just about there. We believe in August, when we come back, we will have this new program offering. It may be small at the beginning, but we think we're going to be there. And what we mostly wanted to ask them at that time was, who would like to be on the front edge of this wave with us when it comes to providing the most inclusive experience that's appropriate for each student? In other words, with the support of peer mentors, being able to get into the general classrooms, to have those learning experiences, and also for us, obviously, to be able to support each student's learning needs and goals. What was very heartening for a faculty of about 100, we immediately had about 35 to 40 folks come up immediately and say, I want to be part of this in whatever form or fashion it takes. I'm ready to get trained. I'm ready to welcome those students into my classroom. And so they became that sort of front leading edge of what we were going to do. And in fact, in the summer of 15, we did begin the program. And as you saw that picture from Paul VI a few minutes ago, O'Connell's program is roughly that size now. So in terms of capacity increasing across the diocese, we now have all 4 of the diocesan high schools having a program that supports students with intellectual disabilities, albeit, obviously there's a numbers limit at each place, but the overall capacity has grown dramatically during that time. So I mostly wanted to share the connection. I think I will just close on this point too. Ultimately, it was decided that for expanded services at Bishop O'Connell, we would not charge additional tuition. In other words, from the outset, we were going to say there is no extra tuition for families who have a child with an intellectual disability who's been admitted to O'Connell. We wanted that to be part of the reality. What that says about the other piece where tuition is still charged for the Muller Center, fortunately for many students in the Muller Center, after about 2 years, they don't need the support of the Muller Center. So it may be that they're only paying that tuition or extra tuition for freshman and sophomore years. But I also think it would be a great goal to look for ways to sunset that tuition obligation if possible, and sort of just bake into the budget the fact that we're going to provide that support. And if your student is admitted and has need for the Muller Center because of dyslexia, dysgraphia, some kind of executive function issue, we can support that. So I did want to make that point, and I'll leave it there for now, Diane.
Great, thank you. So as Joe said, all 4 of our diocesan high schools and then 15 of our elementary schools enroll students with intellectual disabilities. Some of those schools, it may only be 1 child or 2 children. Starting small is not bad, but when you have a family, they've been a long-term family in your building, and then they have this child with Down syndrome. We want to keep those families together. And so we do encourage our parents to go to the principal and say, can you take Diane? She's our last child. She has Down syndrome. And that's pretty much how our schools have gotten started. It's parents asking, please take my child. The rest of my kids are already there. When Joe and I were putting this together, we started thinking about what was the progression of getting there. And, back in the early days, Catholic schools didn't enroll students with disabilities at all, or parents didn't tell us there was a disability, or maybe they didn't know at that time. And we moved from there to students who are self-contained, and then mainstreaming became a thing. We've talked a lot about inclusion. We are at a point of wanting our students to belong, not just be included in our schools. We want them to be part of the school, to be part of the academics, the extracurriculars, and our parishes as well. So we do a conference every year that we've done 3 conferences, I'll be honest. We're planning our 4th. We call it From Inclusion to Belonging. And we're trying to help our parishes figure out how to make sure our individuals with disabilities are belonging to the parish. Are they altar servers? Are they in the choir? Are they part of the Knights of Columbus? But also within our schools then, just making sure that they are part of everything that's going on, the sporting events, the prom. And at our schools, it's so interesting to listen to the administrators and our peer mentors who we'll talk a little bit about just how important it is to have the neurodiversity within their buildings. While it may not be easy, they can't imagine not having all of those students there. Did you want to add anything to that, Joe?
No, yeah, I think that point you ended on just reminded me of that conversation I had with one of our parish school principals who said basically precisely that. She said it's been the year that they sort of took the leap, if you will, with the young student. And I asked her about it in the lobby of the school, and she said, it's been hard, very hard at times, but also we can't imagine not having done it. And I think I would also say about this arrow depiction here that we've put together is an interesting thing that has come up recently that could be discussed, and it's probably too much for getting into deeply in this webinar, is a family looking for their child to be in one of our Catholic schools, but their pursuit is actually something that is more self-contained, perhaps because of the student's needs or how the child learns best. And that's kind of interesting. And I think in all of our high schools, it could be said that there are rooms where individualized instruction can take place for students with an intellectual disability, but there's an emphasis on trying to achieve that sense of belonging and to provide inclusion into the general learning in the classroom around the building. So it is, I suppose the point I'm making is just about the importance of those conversations with parents from the very beginning when you first meet them, and to ensure the clarity of objectives right at the outset.
I think that's really important, Joe. I know for myself, coming from public school, we were all about daily living skills and, basic reading, basic math, but how you apply that in your daily life. And to come to the Catholic schools where the parents, that's not necessarily what they were looking for. They were like, we'll teach them cooking and washing their clothes at home. You don't have to worry about that. They wanted their child to be included in the academics, to be able to form those friendships and just belong to their Catholic school. So it was a mindset change for me, and for some of our teachers as well. But being on the same page with the parents is so important. So if we could go to the next slide, Joe. Sure. When we talk about the difference between being included and belonging, if you think of trying to fit in, you're twisting yourself around into this human pretzel in order to fit in with the rest of the group. But when you belong to something, you are just who you are, and you're accepted that way. And I love the quote under the picture, which is, when someone is truly included, there's no question about your presence, only your absence. And I think that's what we're finding within our schools now. Everybody just accepts all of our individuals who have any kind of learning difference. And there's no question about, when I first came, you'd hear a lot of, oh, those students don't belong here, I'm not ready to teach them. We don't necessarily hear that anymore. Everyone belongs.
I think there's a great sense that emerges, and I feel like I did live through this at Bishop O'Connell, where the great reminder that everyone can learn and everyone learns differently is reinforced powerfully through these programs. And I have had the experience of interacting with some folks in some of our school communities who will talk about, well, these are college preparatory high schools, and this program has a lot of extra costs associated with it. Just to really put it crudely, like the cost per student is so significant there. And one of the lines I've used is, well, whenever you make a decision, for example, to offer multivariable calculus when you only have 8 students enrolled, but you apply the resource of a teacher to teach that class, you're kind of making a similar decision. So this is, it's just an anecdote to highlight the way that we frequently are making extra efforts across the whole neurodiversity of our school to serve our students. So.
Very true.
All right.
We just wanted to give you a little idea of what has occurred with our number of students. And this is all disabilities, because it's very hard to, as the Office of Catholic Schools, we do not have student records here. So I'm getting information from our schools, and you could be in one of our options programs or whatever with an intellectual disability or with autism possibly. So I don't want to say these are just students with intellectual disabilities. So we started in 2003 collecting this data. We were just above 6% of our student population across the diocese. And I will say the majority of those students back in 2003 were students with learning disabilities or specific speech language disorders. You can see it's not a straight growth up. It's a little bit of mountains. It varies from year to year. Some of this is a result, we know, of data collection, making sure that whoever is filling out our survey understands how do you know if they have a learning disability? How do you know if they have a speech language disorder? How do you know if they're vision impaired? And so we try to get them to work with identification from the public school system, since that is who can identify students who are eligible for special education services.
Sorry, Diane, go ahead.
I was going to say, I once had a school tell me they had 200 students with vision impairments. And I was like, no, you don't. You probably have 200 students who wear glasses, but they're not eligible for special ed services. So that was an easy way for me to help that school understand how they got to finding the information.
I just wanted to reinforce the point about the importance of data collection and point out that it was in only in the 2021 time period that we were able to employ for the first time a full-time diocesan health and wellness coordinator who has been able to work with Diane and the schools to increase and enhance the reporting of this information across a range of things that go also into other health issues that students have and so on. I also, and Diane, you can check me on this if I'm stretching or reaching too much, but having a comprehensive student information system or school information system prior to, I don't think, prior to certainly 2010, we didn't have one. And since 2010, I don't think we have fully optimized it yet, which I think Diane was hinting at. There are ways to enhance the reporting in PowerSchool, which is what we use. But I'm not sure we're fully optimizing it yet. But I think that as you see the graph going up to the right at the end, I think it does reflect some greater focus on data, accurate data collection. And, it's something we have to keep an eye on all the time.
Absolutely. This also tells me that I have to work with our principals frequently to make sure that they are looking at the makeup of their classes. Because if you have a fifth grade class of 25 students and 24 of them have some kind of learning issue, that's going to be a very difficult program for your teachers to go through that year. So they do look at trying to maintain a healthy balance of typical neurodiversity ratios so that our teachers aren't totally overwhelmed. It also tells us we have to do a lot of professional development in order to help our students, with universal design for learning and just planning for all those students within your classroom.
Maybe this is as good a place as any, Diane, to bring, to go a little deeper on that. We know what Diane said is true, perhaps instinctively, but also through data, through survey data of our teachers and our administrators in the fall of 22. And from that survey data, we contracted with a consultant to help us begin to chip away at that challenge. Last year, we were happy to host a PLC for principals, looking to increase inclusion in their schools, inclusion of students with disabilities. We concurrently hosted a PLC for instructional coaches that was conducted by the consultant. And this year, we're going to run a second round PLC. We're going to keep the instructional coach PLC going. We're going to start a second one for another group of instructional coaches. And we're going to have grade level, 3 different grade level PLCs, one for K1, one for 2-3, and one for 4-5, so that we cover most of the elementary school this year, and running additional PLCs to just continue to work on that universal design for learning capability in the schools. Move forward here.
Yes, please. So one of the pieces that we are always trying to figure out, our schools, some of them named their program, options, modern day, evangelist program, and some have chosen not to. And so we started looking at the pros and cons of that. If you have a name for your program, it's easier to brand your program to raise some funds for that. It provides a good descriptor for families and those within your community to figure out who you're serving and what you're doing. But we have some schools that said, no, I don't want an options program. I want the students here, but I want them to be Holy Spirit students, or I want them to be O'Connell Knights, not option students. They didn't want their children or their students to be pigeonholed into a specific category. And parents, they'll call all the time and say, you know, can you tell me what schools have programs for students with intellectual disabilities? And so I'm always trying to help parents understand that we want you to go to your parish or to the school closest to you, because we want to keep the families together. And that's what I mentioned earlier about just trying to make sure that if a family is already in your building and they come to you with a child that has Down syndrome, you know, how can we, as the Office of Catholic Schools, help our principals create an opportunity for that child to be in the school?
Right. Yeah, and there's 37 parish schools, and it's clear from our vantage point that, you know, everybody's in different places of discernment on this. Some the facts on the ground presented themselves in a way that, you know, for example, as Diane was alluding to, a family that had a child born 5 years ago who has Down syndrome, and they already have 4 siblings in the school. The hope from 5 years ago was that it would be possible for that child with Down syndrome to be with their siblings, going to school in the car together, all wearing the school uniform. And so some schools have, some of those 19 schools that Diane was referring to earlier, that's their story to this point. Others perhaps have not been challenged in that way. Others have, you know, for resource reasons are less able. But actually, in some instances, I can also say that some of our, one might say, least well-resourced schools have already been able to admit a child with an intellectual disability. And they're basically, if the child is going from first grade to second grade, they work during first grade to make sure that they're ready in second grade to provide equal services going forward. So.
All right. So,
oh, and Diane, could I just say too about, it is interesting, like if you choose to not give what you're doing a name and call it a program, in the case of expanded services, it's interesting too that eventually over time some people affiliated with and familiar with will start saying the expanded services program. So it can be you know, things can emerge and unfold in that way. But I think the point here is, like, what are you intentionally trying to communicate to your community about what you're doing and providing?
So from 2005 moving forward, we had to build a lot of parent trust. There was, you know, the whole thought that if a parent said, my child has a disability, that we would say, you can't stay. You have to take them to public school. So that's a big thing that I think we're finally getting to a point where parents are free to say that. And, you know, a lot of times just specific disabilities, you say the word autism, it's such a huge, forgot the word, but, you know, there's such a wide range of what autism can mean. And so trying to get our teachers then and our principals on board to understand, don't look at the disability, at the word. Let's look at the child. Let's look at their strengths. Let's look at what they can do and what their needs are. And then let's determine, can we serve that child? So I'm looking at a question in the Q&A, and it's, you know, do we limit the number of students within the elementary schools? We only have a couple schools right now that have it seems to be where everybody wants to send their child because they've been, you know, Holy Spirit, they've been doing it for almost 10 years now. So it's really more of how many fifth graders can we take, or how many fourth graders can we take? So it's more about looking at each different grade level. Within the high schools, when they start looking at who is going to get in and who isn't, they're looking at skill levels. They're bringing them in for shadow days. If it's a student who's going to be a runner and they're going to be out the door before somebody can stop them, that's going to be something that the school administration is going to look at, because we certainly want it to be a safe place for all of our students, and we don't want to lose any of them. So I'm not going to say it's first come, first serve. They definitely are going to look at who is a good fit for each of the schools. Teacher professional development is ongoing and continuous. We're always looking to figure out, especially with teacher turnover, what can we do? We started out back in 2004, 2005, doing a monthly seminar, and it was open to any teacher who wanted to come or who could get released from the school. And it could be something about learning disabilities, it could be executive functioning disorder, it could be classroom management. So we tried to find out, what do the teachers need, and then provide sessions that teachers could attend each month so we could grow capacity. And then helping our principals learn to hire knowledgeable staff. So the majority of our schools, all of them, all but one, so have at least one special ed certified person within their building, whether it's a resource teacher or it's a classroom teacher with knowledge. That is so helpful, because we're working to help the classroom teachers figure out, if Diane is in my class and I'm teaching science, how can I help her understand the difference between, a nucleus and an electron? So those are the kinds of things that our special ed teachers are helping with, those instructional practices a lot of time. Joe, do you want to touch on the support of our bishop and our strategic plan?
Sure. Yeah. It is critical. And one of the ways I'd like to connect those comments about teacher professional development to the support of the bishop is, we have gotten access to philanthropic resources that have been given to the bishop that he has targeted to the school's office for use in support of programs to support students with intellectual disabilities. And one of the ways that we're using those resources is to work with a consultant who is a former special education teacher in our diocese. And as I was referring to earlier, augmenting Diane's capabilities in our office, this person is now effectively on retainer. We manage the resources through this person has a resource through our office with Diane's help. And schools will call in and say, this fourth grade teacher needs help modifying the curriculum for this student and doesn't have experience with doing that, or doesn't have the confidence, or wants assistance. And so we are able to deploy this person either through virtual meetings or directly going out to the school and supporting those students. This person is also conducting small group sessions, meeting with principals. We've asked her to present at principal meetings and so on. So it's the bishop's support in that way is, literally translated into the ability to provide, I was going to say boots on the ground, tactical support. But the bishop is really by word and example all the time, to our great benefit and to the benefit of the schools. He is present. When we have the Inclusion to Belonging conference, he's present. The mass he has every year for persons with disabilities, the boards that he's serving on, the way he interfaces with Porto Charities and supports the work that they're doing, all of those things are great examples of Bishop's message and encouragement. And so as we speak to the principals as the Office of Catholic Schools, we have that confidence of knowing it's certainly not our agenda, and it's not personally the bishop's agenda, but it is in his role as bishop and leader, he's leaning into this challenge. It's reflected in the strategic plan. There are 5 pillars in the diocesan strategic plan. One is Catholic education for all. And in that pillar, one of the 5 or 6 key items in that pillar is access to Catholic education for students with disabilities. And so we've got great support. And you saw the picture a couple slides ago of Bishop. I'm pretty sure that picture was taken at the Inclusion to Belonging Conference 2 years ago.
That is correct. So we wanted to share with you some of the fruits of saying yes to families who have a child with intellectual disabilities. We held a principals meeting in December, and we invited an elementary teacher, a middle school teacher, and a high school teacher, general ed classroom teachers, to speak to our principals. They did not know each other, but those 3 teachers all said having a child with intellectual disabilities in their grade level, or in the case of high school, it was in French class, makes them a better teacher, which they said it doesn't take away from the rest of the class. It really helps to add to what the students are learning, because they're learning to accept everyone's differences. And we have peer mentors. So at the high school level, it's very easy. We have high school students who give up their study hall in order to go to a general ed class with a student with intellectual disabilities. So they could be going to PE, they could be going to chemistry, they could be going to arts class or a social studies class, and they're helping the student almost like they're a peer mentor. So those peer mentors are learning, because, when you teach someone to fish, you are learning more about what it is you're teaching. Those peer mentors are our future priests, doctors, lawyers, bankers, and they are exposed to so much in terms of individuals with differences. So they're not going to be afraid or concerned about having someone with neurodiversity in front of them. The students with disabilities have so many typically developing role models that they can look to in order to help develop their skill levels. And we have a video link at the end. We're not going to have enough time to get to it today, but it's there for you, which will show you that lifetime friendships develop as a result of our having these peer mentor situations.
Yeah, and it's probably a good time to mention on that front that in all of our high schools, because of the peer mentoring program, students who perhaps didn't know what they wanted to do in college became affirmed in the idea that what they wanted to do in high school was in college is study special education. And it is the case that the program at Bishop O'Connell, which started in 2015, the very first person who was hired, who is still helping us in a consulting capacity, but the first special education teacher we hired for expanded services at Bishop O'Connell was a graduate of Paul VI High School, who had been a peer mentor at Paul VI, who had studied special education in college, become a special educator. We actually hired her out of the public school system to come to Bishop O'Connell to start this program. And the second person hired was her friend, who knew her at Paul VI, who had also become a special education teacher. So some really beautiful things have made that program possible, and that program has now sent many off to college to study special education. So it's been very affirming in that way too.
Some of the challenges that we have encountered, the need for continuous professional development, a lot of it due to teacher turnover, and we always needing to build teachers' confidence. a question in the chat was who provided the monthly seminars. Pretty much that was me at the beginning, or I sought out individuals with more knowledge than I had on certain subjects, and I had a small budget in order to provide these monthly seminars, and that's how we were able to do that. Teachers, we did a recent survey. They are always looking for information. They want to know how to do it and how to do it well, how to educate everyone within their classroom. And we all know it takes knowledge, time, and energy. So always trying to build our capacity within our teachers and our administrators. With our diocesan strategic plan, some of our principals feel like, I need to get on board with this. I've got to get moving right now. Our bishop isn't saying you must do this immediately. He wants us to be prepared. So starting and making sure our teachers are ready, and as families come to us, that we're ready to accept their children. Teachers are always asking for more time. But surprisingly, when you do the calendar, they want to start school here and end school here, but they want some time in between, and you got to get that 180 school days in. So that can be a real challenge sometimes for the Office of Catholic Schools to try to make everybody happy. Funding. Principals will always say, well, I need more money. I need more money to do this. I need to hire more people. Really, you need a teacher who can help your classroom teachers if you're doing universal design for learning and inclusion. The Office of Catholic Schools does not have a budget to provide to the schools any money for these programs. The way the Diocese of Arlington, the way the elementary schools are funded is it's a ministry of the parish. And so it's parish support. So getting the pastors and those finance councils to say, oh, this is a good thing. We need to make sure that our principal there has the funds needed to hire that teacher. The majority of our students do not have, there's not a one-on-one instructional aid attached to each student. Now, I will say we start seeing a need for parents wanting, they want speech therapy, physical therapy, occupational therapy provided during the school day. It makes their job easier. We certainly work with our public school system in order for those students who qualify to get those services. But we do not, as a diocese, provide those things right now. We do have some schools who may contract with a therapist, and the speech therapist. The parents can contract with that therapist to come into the building and provide speech therapy. Since COVID, the wide range of student behaviors that we see is really increasing. A lot of it, I guess, due to anxiety is what the experts are telling us.
I think that contributes to that sense of challenge that the teachers feel, and how the balance that principals are trying to achieve. Definitely.
All right, Joe, we are right at 2 o'clock.
I know, I noticed. All right, so real quickly, this slide is just, many of you know Michael Boyle, and this is an adaptation of some of his scholarship, just to kind of make the point that the challenge is perhaps best summarized by the intersection here of things that need to be done well in pedagogy. There is a baseline of resourcing that needs to happen in terms of both tangible things as well as the cost of professional development and so on. And then there is also very much a mindset shift, which I think we've hit on several times during this presentation. That is to say, those places, those schools that have made the leap have all said, we we are glad we did this. And it took a shift in mindset about what inclusion could be like, what it could look like, how it could work, that kind of shift in mindset. Did you want to say anything else on that, Diane?
No, that's good. If you haven't looked at Michael Boyle's book, A Place at the Table, goodness, it's an excellent framework for getting started with your thinking on this.
A lot of this we have covered. I think Diane just made the second bullet point a minute ago. We've been blessed with some philanthropy. There are some opportunities to apply for grants. I think that's probably an arena that we could go deeper on, and actually maybe Porto Charities, our partner, might also go deeper in applying for grants. But Porto has really emerged from some really strong parent group at Paul VI High School in the late 90s to a really impressive 501c3 that recently has really taken a stronger look at its strategic plan and focus, strengthened its board, and has done some remarkable things in the last 3 years in support of us. And I think part of our message really is, if you build it, they will come. It's daunting, but most folks in our diocesan experience have felt like this was something we really needed to do. And when you watch the video that we'll encourage you to watch, I think you will agree.
Yeah, I think it's important to know we are not out recruiting students with disabilities in general or intellectual disabilities specifically. But when families are coming to us, we are trying to be able to say yes. Ongoing needs, everybody could benefit from tuition assistance. Our administrators are always looking for better and more current instructional materials. And sometimes when you have a student that you're modifying curriculum for, if they're a fifth grader on a second grade level, we've got to help those schools get some materials that can best be utilized by those students. Professional development is always important. Specialized equipment. So, we have one student who is very short, and she needs a stool under her desk in order for her to put her feet on it so that she can sit comfortably. Things like that, we have to look at those needs. And we're fortunate that Porto Charities is able to help us with some of that funding in order to get this equipment. And our teachers, they'll always say, we need more time. We need time to train our peer mentors. We need time to provide training for support for our classroom teachers, for their planning purposes, and for modifying curriculum.
Yeah. And the intentionality of that training of peer mentors is that it pays dividends back when you put the time in to train those high school students as peer mentors. It really pays back. And in some ways, I think we've sort of talked to all of these things that you're seeing on the Where We Are Today. These bullets all reinforce things we've spoken about. But the last one is a new area of emphasis. Again, partnering with Porto Charities. Even here in the diocese, even here in our office, we have a new member of our team who works part-time, who is a graduate of one of our high schools, who has an intellectual disability, but she's working with us and has had a job coach assisting as part of a program the bishop has given us support to. So a lot of beautiful things there.
Absolutely.
All right, here's the link, and I'm just going to copy it. Well, I promise to. I guess I can't do it right now, but I'll figure out how to drop it in there for you. You also will get access to these slides, so the link will be there. I encourage you to watch that video. It's from around 2018, I think, but it remains relevant. It's pretty powerful. Probably a little biased. It's a nice video, and with that, I think we're wrapping it up, Diane, right?
Absolutely. I'd like to thank those of you who hung in there with us. We did go a little bit over time, but just keep in mind, we do want to be a resource for you. We're happy to share whatever we have that might be helpful to you as you get started, or if you're looking to improve something you're already doing. You know, no need to reinvent the wheel. We can borrow and share with each other. So I look forward to working with all of you who might have something we can borrow.
Amen. Thanks everyone for being with us. This was a pleasure, and hope it creates some new networks for all of us.
Thank you both so much. I'm curious if you have a moment. We do have some great questions in the Q&A box. If you had a moment to address them.
Yeah, I think Diane answered Corin's question a few minutes ago.
Great.
Yes, and Joe's question.
Okay, you got that one.
Yep.
Right.
Very good. All right. Thank you so much. Then we'll wrap up here. What beautiful insight you two have shared. Thank you for sharing your time and talents with us today to make sure that, you know, all of God's children are included in our classrooms and our lives. So thank you for what you do. To our participants, thank you for attending this NCEA Summer 2024 webinar series. NCEA continuously strives to improve the quality of our services for our members based on your feedback. So please help us to make an even bigger difference by using the link in the chat coming here to complete a very brief survey. Let me pull that up for you and send it here. If you're interested in a certificate of attendance, please include your email address and name at the end of the survey. All certificates are sent via automated email, so check your spam folder if you do not see one in a few minutes. And on behalf of NCEA, Dr. Vorbach and Mrs. Elliott, we thank you for the opportunity to serve you and be with you today. Goodbye and God bless. And darling Diocese of Arlington staff, thank you so much for being with us today and sharing.
Thank you.
God bless. Thank you.
Thanks, Christy.